12 is better than nothing. I love the fact that we have 23 participants connected. And yes, let me just start, talking to the slides I have prepared. There are some little videos as well. And I hope it will be useful for you, everyone. Honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I hope you will find this useful, because at the end of the day, we're spending time together, and at the end of this time, we want to, we want to leave with something, and hopefully we will all leave with something. And I am the first to say that I leave myself influenced and willing to learn at the end of this hour. As you can see, the title of the presentation is called Mediating Under the Mango Tree. I wish I was the mediator here. Actually, I was not the mediator. One of my colleagues was a mediator here. Actually, two of my colleagues were here mediating this case in Uganda. And this is the place where they've met only one party, the community, and only the representatives of the community. And the reason they've met there is because that was a place with shade. It provided shade for everyone to discuss. But the other party, it seems that they had eyes and ears in that meeting. So you can always imagine that the concept of confidentiality is a very fluid concept in this context. I'll say more about that later when we get to the dispute resolution part of this type of work. Usually, this type of work that I was introduced to some 8-9 years ago, when, yes, Andrea, I was not specialized at all. When they called me from the World Bank and they said, we have this case in Albania, would you be able to go? And I said, yes, I would be able to go. But if you're asking, if I have a lot of experience in bringing together large communities, and I mean, communities, let's say 50,000 people, how do you bring together on one side of the process, not of the table, although there is a table at some point in time during the process, 50,000 people. Sometimes it takes 6 months only to decide who's going to sit around the table representing those community members. And then they said, no, look, you're going to be working with other mediators, so we just want you, and let's see how that goes. And if that goes well, then we may have other cases as well. And that's what I've been doing ever since. The Compliance Advisor Ombudsman, which is the accountability mechanism for the IFC and MIGA, International Finance Corporation, and MIGA, they lend money to the private sector for the World Bank. They were the first mechanism that I worked with, but then I got to mediate cases for other mechanisms as well. But today I would like to present the context and then a little bit more about CAO, while I may make comments about other mechanisms and how they work as well. My first slide refers to the international financial institutions. There are many of them all around the world. Some of them are global, some of them are regional, and they all lend public money. And they are different from commercial banks because usually public money come with different responsibilities than private money, right? All these banks are supporting development projects. They may include highways, energy, may coming from coal, from hydropower plants, from iron works, which supports the construction industry, right? And there are so many benefits around development work, including environmental, social, and economic. Development is supposed to be sustainable. Sustainable means to increase the quality of life for the people today without jeopardizing the quality of life for the people tomorrow. So the question is, how do you do that? How do you ensure that we're helping not only the ones today, but also the ones tomorrow? And in this space, which is called the development space, there are different types of projects. And you see here a coal mine. A coal mine, which is a surface coal mine, they go from 100 to maybe 400 to 500 hectares, And it's like an arrow. It's progressing, in my case, from left to right, in the direction of the digging, those digging excavators that are digging land for, looking for coal. And the direction that this particular coal mine, which was one of my cases, was going to was towards a village. And many years before I was involved, the company started to purchase properties in that village, knowing that they're going that way anyway. But at some point, the village got to the expropriation stage, which is a public process. And guess what? There were some concerns about the process of resettlement. Some community members did not accept the offers that were made, claiming that because of the fact that more and more community members have left the village is becoming sort of a ghost village without, let's say, with less public services, and the value of the property decreased automatically. And therefore, the community resettlement, which legally was made at the value, the legal value, the current market value of the property, according to villagers, the value was decreased because of the company's actions, and they were not happy with what was offered. And now I will ask you, and I'll just run a poll, just to give you 30 seconds. If this would be a mediation and you have the company on one side of the process and the remaining 30 to 50 people in that village trying to find a way forward to really resolve this through dialogue, what do you think that would be the likely outcome for that process? Just click on any of these three options that you see on screen. Would the case settle with some compensation? Would the parties fail to reach consensus because of the different opinions about who's right and who's wrong and all that, or maybe other outcome? I'll leave you 20 more seconds and then we'll end the poll. Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. I like the fact that you're all active. Okay, ending the poll in some 5 seconds now. And we can share I will share the results for everyone. Here we go. So we have some 70, 20, 15 or so. It's clear that we're all optimists in this. We all desire that there is peace and there is, progress. And I will not tell you, not just yet anyway, what happened actually, with your permission. I will give you another example, which is an example about actually the case in Albania that I've mediated, the first case that I've mediated. This case was about the oil company that used some, let's say, technology to extract oil that, according to community members, was inducing earthquakes. And there were discussions about whether there are correlations between company operations and the seismic activity in the region. And there were other concerns related to environmental and social impacts of the operation as a whole. But let me ask you, for such a case, what do you think? Would it be a settlement with some compensation? Would it be a failure with, parties stuck on right and wrong paradigm, or maybe some other solution? Let's take 20 seconds or so. Let's see what you think. Some different responses. Okay, thank you very much. You're very active also. And I can't wait to share the results, because you will see they are slightly different this time. I wish Andrea and Alexandra we had time to discuss why. That would be fun. But I know that time is not our closest friend today. So ending the poll right now, sharing the results that we have at this time. So we have less optimism with the seismic activity. It sounds complicated, doesn't it? I mean, it's like, how can you settle that? 25% settled, 38 parties failed to 50%, some other solution maybe. Okay, and then there is this third example, and this is about steel industry and whether there were negative impacts on the quality of the air, and actually not only the air, it was also the quality of the land, because some concerns were with respect to the vegetables that community members were growing there. In this case, that involved the steel factory and the fact that they were working at night, and there was a lot of pollution in the opinion of community members. According to the company who's operating the project, they said no, they followed all the standards, they received all the permits, and they were using all the filters in line with the international standards. And to all that, the community members said, we don't care, we just know where we live. We've been here for ages and we know that something is wrong. And then, of course, I would ask you in this case also to, let's take only, no, actually, let me relaunch. Yes, let's take only 15-20 seconds, not more, everyone, so that we use time efficiently, and see what you think about this case. These are examples of, concerns that are being subject to dispute resolution in this space. And while you're answering, I will just say that these mediations are a little bit different than the ones that we see in the civil and commercial arena. Let me end the poll for now, share the results, which are also a little bit different, perhaps closer to the second poll than the first one. And let me ask you, what do you think? Do you think that this mediation would be, these types of cases, these types of mediations would require hours, let's say minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, or years? Just type in the chat. Just type the word, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, or years. That'll be fun, just to see what you think, you all think. Oh, months, years, lovely, months. Can we get the days? No? Let's be optimistic, everyone. No days, only weeks, months, and years. Okay. I agree actually with you. They require more time. And I said 6 months earlier, so yeah, in my defense. That was a little bit of a spoiler. Many weeks, Ulrike says. Okay, now let me just explain something. All these people that they are surrounding these projects, the community members, they have concerns. They're not always happy about the jobs that they get. They're not always happy that these companies are paying taxes to the, to the municipalities. They're not always happy that these companies that are implementing these projects are building roads, infrastructure, or are giving money to the local, sports team, or building whatever, supporting the community in whatever shape or form. They also have concerns, and sometimes these concerns refer to the fact that there is pollution, refer to the fact that instead of hiring locals, they are hiring experts from abroad only because there is no talent locally, and they're saying they should hire us. Why they hire other people? And so they have concerns. Bottom line is that there are concerns, and the question is, what do they do with these concerns? They can complain to the companies directly, the organizations directly. They can go to authorities like the environmental authorities, police, municipalities, regional or even national government, and send their concerns. Sometimes they go public. They even start litigation or go to courts and share their concerns. Or they can go to the project lenders, to the very bank that was financing the project. And the project lenders, in addition to having internal grievance mechanism, they also have external or independent accountability mechanisms, or IAMS. And these mechanisms are created to safeguard the policies, the environmental and social policies that the banks have established, only to ensure that that development is sustainable. And the policy is to incorporate human rights requirements. And basically, these mechanisms are independent, are supposed to have some independence from the banks themselves, because they were created to investigate the bank's ability to perform according to their own policies. So that's why these IAMs actually can investigate the banks themselves and not the bank's clients. These IAMs are not investigating the companies that are operating the projects. No, they are investigating the banks themselves. And up to some point, they were only offering this type of service or function, investigation, when you know the stakeholders, including the civil society organizations and the banks themselves and other stakeholders, realize that perhaps dialogue could be one function or one item on the menu. And that's what I called everyone mediation with capital M, or a dispute resolution, or a problem-solving approach, or conflict management, or 1,000 of different names. It's all terminology. Bottom line is some collaborative approach based on dialogue that is supposed to bring together stakeholders to discuss and understand these concerns in a way that allows everyone to contribute to proposing next steps that would be acceptable for everyone and would address the concerns to everyone's satisfaction. And I think we can mute Sanjita. Okay, good. So now we have these IAMs. Let's watch a 2-minute video presenting the concept. Hopefully you will be able to hear as well as to see. Some thumbs up just to confirm would be useful. Let's see.
In the 1990s, following calls for greater transparency and accountability in development projects, international financial institutions, or IFIs, began establishing independent accountability mechanisms to provide recourse for people who believe they have been or could be harmed by IFI-supported projects. In giving local communities a greater voice, these mechanisms, known as IAMs, reflect the principle of citizen-driven accountability and represent an innovation in global governance. Today, a large number of multilateral and bilateral financial institutions have mechanisms, and the network of IAMs is growing. While IAMs differ in size, scope, and structure, they share a common goal: to strengthen development outcomes by providing local communities an impartial, independent, and transparent channel to address social and environmental concerns. IAMs deliver on this goal through different services, among them dispute resolution related to project issues and investigations of an IFI's compliance with its environmental and social policies. IAMs accept complaints in different languages and work with communities to understand their concerns. Over time, IAMs have addressed a range of issues, including inadequate compensation for forced resettlement, destruction of culturally significant landscapes, insufficient engagement with local communities, environmental degradation, threats to community health and safety, and labour issues. In short, IAMs have helped improve the social and environmental performance of the IFIs and have contributed to better development outcomes for people, and through their work they contribute to the global community's broader commitment to sustainable and equitable development. Looking forward, communities will surely face challenges when projects cause unintended harm. IAMs reflect the important commitment of the IFIs to give people a voice when their rights and interests are affected, and to meet the highest standards of transparency and accountability. To learn more about the independent accountability mechanisms and their work, visit the IAMS Network website.
Okay, by the way, they're all buyers for professional mediators, so you know. And I think something is wrong with the website. I tried opening it for a couple of days just to test, as I usually test all the links and all that. But anyway, there is a network. That's what's important to know. And all the development banks, they have these accountability mechanisms, and they're all offering mediation. And by the way, they're hiring mediators for these mediations, because the principle is local problems, local mediators that understand the cultural parameters of the parties themselves. So having mediators that speak the language, that really understand the culture and the way that people think and communicate is paramount. You may have an international mediator being part of the team, but without local mediators, it's really, really difficult to engage. So we're going to take just a few minutes looking at the World Bank Group Independent Accountability Mechanism, the CAO. If you think about the World Bank as a human with two hands, one hand is lending to the private sector, and the other hand is handing to the public, and the other to the private sector. The CAO is the accountability mechanism for IFC and MIGA, which are the units who are lending to the private sector. So I'll just speak briefly about the CAO functions and process. Basically, CAO is an accountability mechanism, reports to the IFC and MIGA boards, and its mandate is to facilitate the resolution of complaints. It responds only to complaints, so it has to be a complaint for CAO to be able to react. To enhance environmental and social project outcomes of all the projects funded by IFC and MIGA, and to foster accountability and learning. By the way, all these slides will be shared with you, should you be interested to, and all the links, including the links to the videos, are there. So don't worry, don't feel like you have to write everything. We can access everything. This chart is nice because it shows that project affected communities go to CAO, who does not report to the management of IFC and MIGA. So that is the independence that is really important. IFC, the World Bank Group board is where the CAO reports, not the management of the World Bank. Which is about creating that perception and the reality for project affected communities that their concerns will be treated fairly, only because it's not the management where they will go. They can share their concerns with the management as well, so that option will always be there for the internal grievance mechanisms, but sometimes they prefer to send to independent mechanisms. The website is cao-ombudsman.org, and you can access it in, I think, 16 languages, which is really interesting. It's about this being accessible for communities worldwide. And I love the fact that they've translated it in 16 languages. Since its establishment, CAO has 22 years of operation, more than 200 cases eligible since 2000, so in 20 years. And this year, 53 active cases all over the world, as you all see. This is happening right now, and these processes are pending, most of them. By sector, you see that we're looking at mining, that gas, chemicals. IFC financial markets have complaints about IFC financial markets have involved sub-projects related to hydropower, mining, and agribusiness sectors. So usually, these are projects that have, as I like to call, large footprints. Large footprints means that there is significant impact in terms of communities that are affected. What complaints can CAO accept? IFC and MIGA-supported projects. So if the complaint refers to a project that is funded by IFC and MIGA, then it would be eligible. Also, it has to refer to environmental and social concerns. For example, if it refers to corruption, CAO would not be, wouldn't have the mandate to intervene. Third, they have to come from the impacted communities. Even if they are brought by civil society organizations, the source of the complaint has to be somebody who is personally impacted. So I may be impacted, but then I cannot, Tudor cannot go to CEO and say, hey, there is a World Bank project and my friend Adi is impacted. No, CEO would like to hear from me the confirmation that, there is an impact, negative impact. In terms of the mandate and functions, as I explained its mandate previously, to enhance the outcomes and to foster accountability and learning, there are three functions: dispute resolution, referring to offering a collaborative problem-solving approach, and this is our turf, our trade. They use mediators for this. Although there is a specialized type of work, and we can always discuss about the competencies that one needs to top up her or his skills to be more efficient in getting involved in these types of cases. But essentially the same principles underpin that process. Compliance, as I said, usually if dispute resolution if parties do not have, let's say, a shared appetite for dispute resolution, or if dispute resolution is not completely successful, then a compliance review could be undertaken, and that compliance review would be focused on the bank, not on the client. Finally, CEO has an advisory function where they provide advice to the banks given trends and patterns observed in different types of cases. How CAO works? Basically, once a complaint is received, CAO works with the affected community and the client of the bank, of IFC or MIGA, to decide whether they want to voluntarily engage in dispute resolution or not. If they would like to engage voluntarily in dispute resolution, then CEO would involve a professional mediator or a team of mediators, and there would be a dialogue process that would be, as you all said, unfolded for probably months, if not months, for years. Certainly not weeks, I would say. In terms of no shared appetite for dispute resolution, then the other function, the compliance function, would appraise, would decide on the bank's ability to perform to their standards. And usually, always, there is the public report speaking about that process, whether there is compliance or non-compliance. What happens when a complaint is accepted? As I said, CEO conducts an assessment. You see Tat Lim, the person with the dark t-shirt in the center. He's from Singapore. He's our friend. I think, Andre, I know that. He's there with community members, trying to understand their concerns and to really explain what mediation is, what dialogue means, and how that could be done, only so that they make an informed choice about choosing to pursue that route or not. What's important is that in this assessment stage, the CEO would not pass substantive judgments on the merits of the complaint. So once that process is completed, then if parties would like to engage in dispute resolution, then that process would be, as we all know, non-judicial, non-adversarial, neutral forum. It will be facilitated by third-party neutral or neutrals. It's bound by principles of confidentiality, although you can imagine that the confidentiality circle includes all the 50,000 people in the community. So think about that. Then instead of confidentiality, you think about the proper balance between confidentiality and transparency within that space. And the question is, how can you achieve that? And it's quite difficult. I have mediated a number of cases with mass media outside, willing to take, comments and then the report from the process. And basically, you go back to the principles and you ask the parties, what would you like to be reported publicly, if anything? And that's a very, very interesting conversation to have with parties in this space, because usually for community members, when you talk about confidentiality, they hear secret, hidden. We don't want things to be secret. We don't want things to be hidden. We want them to be open. We would like everyone to be informed. And we can only use mass media for that. Bottom line, community and the company should own both the process and its outcomes, as we all know. How to build such a process in this space? You start by undertaking a professional conflict assessment. Remember, Tudor, all those classes from the university? You still have the scars. All those theories about how do we look at conflict, how do we analyze different conflict parameters, and so on and so forth. Then you build the parties' capacity to decide who are trusted representatives representing a variety of interests within the company that would represent the community, that would represent the community in the mediation. So you look at different groups. If there may be a factory with women working, in a clothing factory, then you go there and you meet the union leaders perhaps, and you ask them if they'd be interested to be represented in such a process. And you meet other groups within the community, and you always ask, who else should I see so that the community is properly represented? Anyone else that we're missing? And that process takes weeks and months, and you have to build trust, and you have to really understand the cultural parameters, as said. And then you bring them together, and oftentimes you have to teach them how dialogue works to be effective, the effective communication principles, active listening, and all of that. So that's all part of the preparation. Once that is clear for everyone, then parties would have the ability to inform the process design, so that only then the parties will be able to really get engaged and to have a say in saying, we don't want to see the mid-level management of the company. We want to see high company officers, because they are the decision makers. We don't want only talk. We want companies, representatives who are willing to walk their talk. And all that requires capacity, everyone. And we often start our mediations without actually being clear if the parties themselves have the capacity to engage effectively. And I think we have a role in building that capacity before even starting to mediate or even starting to design the process. Then, of course, we have the facilitated dialogue, which we all know how it works, and the settlement agreement. And we usually get involved in the monitoring of the implementation. And this is a different conversation, and certainly we don't have the time to do that now. There is a process you see on this chart that, again, instead of having an agreement to mediate, which in the civil and commercial arena is a set type of document, you just ask the parties to sign. Here, we actually work with the parties to come up with the language in that agreement to mediate, and that language is called ground rules for mediation. And basically what we say is, well, let's think about all the different situations that may occur and what can we do to respond effectively so that the process is solid. For example, should a community member come tomorrow once the process starts and say, hey, Sharon, you don't represent me. You're a community member, but you don't represent me. I would like Andrea to represent me, or some other community members who are not yet in the process. Sometimes they're tough and they say, who are you to represent me? And they would like to have the community representation discussion reopened. The ground rules should respond to such situations. What do we do then? And we usually work with the parties to understand that they can decide together, and they usually include language according to which the representatives of the community and the company will discuss representation should that conversation would be opened by any community member or company representative. Just to give you an example, and I have some examples, but we certainly don't have the time to share these examples. There is an example of a mediation in Egypt with some compensation. It was about labor and employment issues. The compliance work, I wouldn't spend too much time, because usually it's about an investigation. It's like an internal investigation that is conducted by the accountability mechanism. And what is interesting to be said is that the dispute resolution happens in the shadow of this process. And think about that dynamics. Think about what would dispute resolution look like without the compliance, without this shadow. And that we can have a very interesting conversation. We can open small group discussions and see what you think about that. Obviously, we don't have the time because I would like you to ask some questions. So I'm trying to wrap in 3 minutes right now. The World Bank, they have 8 performance standards referring to risk management, labor, resource efficiency, community, land resettlement, biodiversity, indigenous people, and cultural heritage. They are protected by CAO while CAO conducts its investigation. And there is an example of a case in India where CAO found non-compliance and therefore published a report, and the client committed to implement a detailed corrective action plan to improve living and working conditions on those plantations in India. Just to see that both dispute resolution and compliance can lead to effective outcomes. The advisory work, I presented it briefly. I don't think we need a lot of time for that. What you should know is that CAO has a framework for responding to threats and reprisals. There are cases, not necessarily related to CAO, there may be cases related to other mechanisms where community members are really concerned physically that they would be subject to threats and reprisals only because they send their complaints to these mechanisms. Imagine the political environment, the social environment, all the reprisals that can happen. We have community members who are telling us, I am a community member, but also an employee of the company, and I'm afraid that I will lose my job only because I signed this complaint. Others get imprisoned by the government only because they sent their complaints. Others have died. So this is serious business. And when you receive a complaint, you really have to take any complaint seriously and check if there is any potential for threats and reprisals, and adopt an approach as a mediator that is very, very, that considers those threats and those risks effectively. Because at the end of the day, we want to, before helping, we don't want to make things worse, right? Remember, this is what we learn during our basic training. Very briefly, we don't have time, so I really have to finish. There is a gender-inclusive approach to dispute resolution, and this is very seriously. Bottom line, women's participation in conflict prevention and resolution can improve outcomes. And CAO mediators have seen repeatedly a resistance to include women and gender diverse stakeholders in its dispute resolution processes. And then there is a gender note, and there are documents, there are tools that can be used. And by the way, they're publicly available. You have the link right here. We can always go to the CAO website and read about these things, the threats and appraisals framework, the gender inclusive approach. These tools that you see on screen refer to getting started with these types of cases. You know, maybe tomorrow any of you can receive a request, and then you can go to the CAO website and see how, you know, what some of our colleagues have summarized in writing about these types of work, referring to what do you do to actually facilitate representation for 50,000 people, and so on and so forth. And then I have 2 videos that perhaps you can watch on your own once this is over. I see Ombudsman has a YouTube channel. You can easily see all the resources there. I don't think we have the time to watch them. There will be 5 more minutes. I will just finalize by saying this. All 3 cases, the correct answer was 3 other outcomes. In every case, this is not about black or white. It's not about settlement or failure. It's about different types of outcomes, sometimes so creative, sometimes some form of outcomes that are not like a settlement, but they address the concerns. Everyone says, yeah, this dialogue process was helpful, and we believe it should end. Although the concerns are still there. But for the purposes of this process, we're happy and we should stop. And I'm not going to say more, perhaps for a different meeting. Don't forget about this, all these clients, all these buyers, they're out there. Would I be a young mediator or an experienced mediator? I would send my CV to all these mechanisms. And I would say, look, I live in Tunisia, I live whatever, you may have cases there. Follow up. I'll be happy to, I would like to learn about this type of work. I'm trying to learn. I would like to help. I would like to shadow. Should mediators, experienced mediators would come to whatever. And I would like to learn from them. Is there an opportunity to attend capacity building efforts, to shadow experienced mediators, to see them on the work? Actually, I had mediators following me in a number of countries, which is fun.